Welcome back, everybody, to your daily update on the state of the Malazan Empire. Today, we're going to talk about The Crippled God, Book 5. Yeah, I finished it today, and I guess I'll take tomorrow and Thursday to talk about Book 6. And then we'll probably take 2 or 3 days to finish it up with a Book 7, which has some very long chapters near the end. We'll see how that goes. Anyway, I can almost see the end being very, very near. But before that, let's start today. Chapter 5. Ooh, cheers. All right, so obviously we come to the point where stuff is really happening. We see a lot of that in chapter 15, I feel. Chapter 15, right? Should be the one with the shake and the battle at the wall at Lightfall. What I'd be first, I wanted to look at that chapter before that, which is chapter 14, I think. Or I may have chapters completely wrong because I'm an idiot. But so we see new levels of power within Badal showing up. She can apparently reach out to other people in their minds. She saves, for some reason, she saves Mappo when he's lying there and almost being eaten by the divers, whatever you want to, however you want to pronounce that. Um, but yeah, I guess the interesting thing there once again is the idea that she has like power, and the power is in words, which obviously has a specific message to it, I guess. And beyond that, we mostly focus on the bone hunters being you know tortured by thirst even more than before. Blizdig is reaching the end of his whole, of his patience, of his sanity. He sees himself as the last, like, sane man in there trying to actually get stuff done. He just has decided that the adjunct is insane and needs to be stopped. Once again, as I said before, I have a lot of sympathy for Blizdig in general. Um, the main thing though that stuck out is that conversation, or the lack of like that whole confrontation with the Kundril, and with in this case first with Hanavat and what's her name, Relat, not Relata, Shalamasa, um, about you know taking back words and so forth, but also the thing that Fiddler says when he just walks past and just slaps them all down. The idea that pride is something that we hold on in desperate straits when we have nothing else. We hold on to pride, especially pride of like our past and stuff like that. It's an interesting notion because it's obviously true. It's true on a personal level. We oftentimes we dig ourselves holes and we were unable to get out of those because we are standing in our own way. And this sounds like like an absolute truism, and it's probably everyone is aware of that. But I feel the important bit there is to understand how extremely difficult it is when you are in that kind of position, in that kind of situation. How difficult it is to actually dig yourself out of that. How difficult it is to actually get over that pride that is holding you down, holding us down. It's extremely difficult. It's like, whereas we from the outside can often, if someone is struggling with these kind of things, we from the outside we can often very clearly see that. We can very, very clearly see those solutions and see the problem, but it's extremely difficult for a person in that situation. Like, whether it's it doesn't matter what kind of situation you're in. It's the idea of falling like so deep or like losing all of it so you can actually realize where the actual problem is one that, it's very difficult to come by. And on the other hand, it's also very, very difficult to you know actually listen to outside influences. I feel it's something that, for example, where often struggle with it, or not struggle with it, is in questions of, like, for example, also mental health. When we talk from the personal level, as I said, it's also something of like on a larger scale, which you have here with traditions and stuff like that. And we're going to come to that in a minute. But I feel like it's very important, like on the personal level, when we talk about something like mental health, where it's super difficult to accept the fact that maybe you have a problem that you need to face and need to work on. It's super easy to, always say like, yeah, well, I can get all of this sorted out. I'll stick to all these like things that I've done before, whether they're toxic or not doesn't matter. We just keep on doing these things because they are routines, and much more than that, because they make up who we are, right? They make up our identity, and it's very difficult to change one's identity, because doing that will always automatically question everything you've done before and possibly devalue things that you have currently still, some attachment to, that you see as part of your identity, that, you know that means questioning all your like previous choices and stuff like that, and that's extremely difficult. And what we can see here is that sometimes it takes an outsider's perspective to just, force someone to accept these problems. That's like on the personal level. It also, and this is where we come to the other part, is like that, yes, traditions, traditional pride, traditional rituals, and so forth are something that all kinds of groups, whether they're like, really large groups of people, or small groups of people, or a country, a nation, I don't like the word nation, but, have these, and they make up, once again, part of an identity. An identity is always a construct to help us actually, survive or get through the world, basically get through what, the universe throws us at us every day. So these things are important, but they once again make it very difficult to change. And what we can see here with Fiddler going in and doing what he does, we can see this as maybe an idea that sometimes an outside agency coming to a group and telling them that certain practices are wrong, or like need to be left behind because of circumstances that have changed, is acceptable, because it's the only way to come through that. I know that's a difficult thing to say, because we tend to, and I certainly believe that for the most part, every group has the right to decide their own future, to decide their like ways of living. That goes for like all kinds of group, whether they're like people or a specific part of a culture or a subculture or whatever. It's like you do you, that's fine. But sometimes we need to actually have the idea of like lacking a word here. Intervention is what I'm looking for. Sometimes we need an intervention, an outside intervention, to realize the problem that we're facing, in a way. And this is sort of what I took away from the whole Fiddler and so forth incident there. Yeah. The other part, obviously, is the question of like is there always a comeback from loss or not? Because grief is, once again, we've spoken about grief before. Grief is absolutely devastating. Grief and loss are difficult to get back from, and we see someone like War Eater Gaul having the problem of, yeah, having basically no one to take away his blame, because he blames himself for what's happened, and since he is the leader of that group, it's very difficult for him to actually get absolution. Absolution is something we need. Absolution is something we work through ourselves usually, because the idea of absolution from an outside perspective is once again very can be seen as problematic. It's like in the end we need to accept ourselves what we did or didn't do and so forth. And the question that we face with Gaul is still like, are there situations where you won't come back, where you can't come back because you're too deep in it? Which transitions nicely into something that I wanted to look at in chapter 15, I guess. When we are talking about the Tis Liosan, we're talking about the remembrance of April Forge when he remembers the appearance of Calor. And Calor's like speech. I don't want to. Yeah, well, basically it's a speech. His words on the subject of suicide, and that suicide is often is described as weakness and so forth, but it's usually the outside world that has a huge influence on that, or has to take part of the blame for something like that happening, because it's us, the world, that pushes people to a point where they can't come back from. In the case of someone like war leader Gaul, it obviously is the way his society is structured that he has like no other way to deal with like blaming himself for all the things that have happened, because the way this kind of society is built up. But obviously there's always all kinds of other like outside influences, and yeah, the idea that it is, as they say, I don't know, cowardly to do that or whatever, is obviously wrong. Like, ideas like cowardice are something that are very difficult to apply to something like that. So yeah, they're usually used by people in their own way, in their like own efforts and attempts to take to lessen their feelings of guilt and so forth, because guilt is something that we all feel all the time. Once again, that's just, I found that like a very powerful thing, because it manages even to show us, even though Khadgar Fenn is not exactly a nice person, quite the opposite. But with that situation about his grandmother, great grandmother, I think, and all of that, we suddenly see that even he has motivations and reasons for being the way he is. And this is something that I found once again extremely interesting, extremely powerful within the Malazan Book of the Fallen. It's like, if we go back to the whole Bidithal thing, he's sort of the only one, or one of the few characters where it's very, very difficult to have any kind of empathy. There's a few more, but it's not exactly that many. But most other characters, even the ones that we see as evil or that cause a lot of harm and pain, even those usually have reasons that can be understood and empathized with. As I said, not all, but most characters have, which makes the ones that are, by our standards, almost like, evil, pure evil, stick out so much. It's like most of them are super, not relatable, but the kind of reasons where if you're an empathetic person, you sit back and like, if I were in that situation, how would I have turned out as a person? Whether that's with someone like Felicin, which is obviously very understandable, but even with someone like, I don't know, Blizdig, or in this case, Khadgar Fenn, it's like, would I be so much different? Maybe this goes even for Olar Ethil, because I feel there is something in there as well. But yeah, who knows? I just found this like interesting to look at. What else? Yeah, I find the the situation of Sanderlath through Corlat. Still difficult to read. Her descent into, maybe you can call it madness, maybe you could call it depression, I don't know. Very difficult to read personally. Yeah, because it's one of those paths she's on is like, once again, it's one of those where you're like, is there any way for her to get out of there? Is there any way? And then it's like, maybe there is not. And how do you react to that? It's like everyone tries to save her. Even Mother Dark kind of tries in a way when she talks to Withal. But is there any way for her to do that? Probably not. And I don't know, I find these kind of storylines very difficult to read when you basically know that it's all, you know, going to go to like a terrible end and there's nothing to be done. And it's also very difficult to blame anyone. I guess that's like the important bit there. Is like with a lot of these situations, it's very easy to find some place to put the blame. So like, this is like the wrong choice that was made here, and from there on things and so forth. You have like an event, like a chain of events, and you see where choices were made that were wrong. But with someone like Sanderlath through Cordat, it's very, very difficult to figure out how that where that happened. Although the one thing that I saw like this time where I feel maybe I'm getting is the idea of her being a hostage and being treated as a child. But what that means is that like growing up is obviously something that is very difficult. Like actually becoming an adult is very difficult, apart from just, you know, gathering on the years. Like I'm still not very grown up in all the things I do, but I realize that it is a very difficult thing to do. It also means, you know, starting to rely on yourself, accepting action, accepting responsibility for the consequences of one's actions and so forth. It's something, you know, things that we learn over time. And if you never manage that in the position of a hostage, for example, is something is very difficult because you don't have agency. So your actions don't actually have consequences because you can't take that many actions, and all the things happening to your life are the consequence of others' actions. So that is very much like the state of childhood in a way. Which obviously is a two-edged recognition, because it on the one hand means that yes, as a hostage you are still as a child, but on the other hand, and this is something that is really important for the Malayan Book of the Fallen, I feel, on the other hand, it means that children are sort of our hostages, because we as grown-ups, or yeah, you know, can more or less do a lot of things with children we can't just do with other adults. And a lot of responsibility comes with that as well. When we look at something like the snake here in the Crippled God and Thus the Dreams, for example, we very much have that problem, that situation where we see what happens if we don't, you know, take that responsibility or don't face up to it. Yes. Another thing that I found just beautiful, once again, something that Stephen Erickson is really good at in general. I've said that before, and I feel like Toll the Hounds is very much about that, but I found it here again, is the idea of mirroring things in a sort of microcosm way. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that we see that personal relationships, relations, sometimes echo larger relations in a way. And what I mean here in this case is, like I told the Hounds, it's basically the relationship between Harlow and Stani being, well, Harlow younger obviously, being very similar to the relation between Anomander Rake and Mother Dark, where in both cases at the end of the book, the son, forces the mother to acknowledge him through very drastic means, so to speak. We have something similar here, and that's with Ian Tobis and that one Sheikh girl whose name I've already forgotten because I feel like it's like only mentioned once. the one with her two brothers that is then coming to is talking with Ian Tovis, and her like idea that she was always taking care of her brothers, and now she can't anymore because the events they're caught up in right now are yeah, she can't actually keep them safe anymore, and it's very much mirrors the thoughts of Ian Tovis as queen of the Sheikh and the responsibility that comes with being the queen or like leader of one's people, because that has, I mean, we have that idea of like a king or a queen being like the parents of a people. That's something that you find in a lot of like more romantic or notions of kingship or queenship in that case. And Erickson just drives that home when he talks about like when he shows us the actual consequence of taking that idea seriously, because it means you suffer a lot when your people suffer, just like you would suffer if you know, your actual kids or other family members, like actual blood relations, suffer because of your perceived inaction or perceived lack of power to do something about it, which, you know, is pretty fucking powerful. So yeah, there's that. I guess one final thing before we end this, because it's once again getting pretty fucking dark out here, and while I have nothing against Crippled God, I'd rather sit in Emerald at the moment. That thing being what Erastus wants and things like that. The idea that what Erastus and some of the elder gods apparently want, or mostly Erastus the Errant, wants is to have to be a god without consequences, to be worshipped by the spilling of blood in the world of chaos, where you're like you don't actually have anything to do. You're just worshipped, and stuff is ascribed to you whether you do it or not. Because obviously, if chaos reigns entirely, Erastus has no control. So even though people, you know, beg for his intercession, there's nothing he can do. But he still wants to get worshipped for that, and that, once again, is a very, very human trait. I guess that's one of the things we need to look at, is like how much of that is like how much gods are just like humans, just with maybe more power. It's like you look at it, like a lot of people want, you know, worship, respect, or whatever, without actual consequence, like without actual responsibilities. It's how that works. It's highly morally reprehensible. You know, there we are. The other thing that I found interesting there is when we talk about like these like similarities to humanity, the argument between, or not argument, but the explanation of how dragons work when it comes to power and so forth, when Silchas talks to what's his name, Rudelal, and explains that too many together will start, you know, will end in chaos and like a frenzy, and like the stronger ones will enslave the weaker ones to their will. That's like, once again, like a very apt description of humans in a way. It's like, yeah, we are also, like, if you have like large groups of humanity together, you will automatically see that they behave irrationally. Crowds behave irrationally. Large groups of people behave irrationally. You'll always have ringleaders in there that will go and, you know, kind of take control of less strong-willed people in there. So, you know, there's that. Yeah. Also, obviously, the meeting of Silchas Ruin and Tulas Shorn is incredibly incredibly funny and powerful. Obviously, it's emotionally powerful, but it's also extremely funny when they just start like insulting each other, and then you realize that they're just like old friends and so forth. There's that, which, you know, I appreciated. I guess we need to talk about Gruntle as well, and his, like, once he actually shows up at Kilava's place in the Refugium and explains that he just wants to actually kill trike, or like by forcing him into the world and so forth, because he doesn't want to be used as a mortal sword, which I, can understand. Once again, there was something earlier that I found interesting with Gruntle, but I kind of forgot what it was about. Now I can't fully recall. It was about Capistan and meaning, and how we ascribe meaning to meaningless death to justify things. And yeah, meaning is something that is like super elusive. It's like we make our own meanings for all the things that we do. And this idea is like that we want our deeds, our actions to have meaning, but in the end, it's us who create that meaning anyway and change that meaning all the time. Meaning is something that can be changed a lot if you want. But yeah, those are sort of the disjointed ramblings for today. Yeah, I'll talk to you tomorrow about more Malazan and maybe something else as well. We'll see how that goes. Until then, cheers.